Hey guys, Miss Lawson here. It's Wednesday, April 15th, and I am here with Leonardo DiCaprio, my cat. And here's the thing. I try to put him on camera, and he really doesn't like it, and I'm kind of feeling like maybe I pressured him too much with this name. It's like I named him after a famous movie star, and maybe now he just feels too much pressure, or like maybe, okay, yeah, all right, okay. Or maybe he feels like, this is forced on him and it's just not something that he wants, you know? Because when I put him on camera, this is basically all I get. And it's like, I would think that he could, perform a little, do something, but no, he doesn't. He hates it. He hates the camera. This is what I've done to him. So anyway, um, just really something I've been thinking about since I'm obviously bored out of my mind. Those are the kinds of things that are occupying my thoughts. It's very sad. Another thing that was occupying my thoughts, though, was you guys, obviously. I was thinking about how some of you guys I feel like I really got to know well, but how I just felt like I was starting to really learn about some of you or build a relationship with some of you, especially if you were kind of a little more shy and quiet. I don't think teachers necessarily have favorites, but I do think that teachers sometimes form stronger bonds with some students just by the nature of their personalities, right? Like sometimes you really get to know a kid because they're really open about sharing their life or they're a little more outgoing, and others it takes a little more work. And when you're caught up in learning and getting so many things done, sometimes those relationships with the quieter, less open students just don't happen as naturally, and you kind of run out of time. And I hate that. And I felt like for a few of you, I was just getting to know you and just getting to kind of build a relationship with you. And part of what really sucks about this quarantine is that was kind of shut down. But I don't want it to be shut down. So during today's COVID connection at the end of the lesson, I want you guys to go in and tell me a couple fun facts about yourself. It could be anything you think I might not know about you. It could be about things you like, your hobbies, an accomplishment that you've had that I had no idea about, something interesting about your family or your ancestry that I didn't know. Really anything, a talent you have that I had no idea about. Just tell me something about yourself. I'll share too with you right now about me. Some of you know and some of you don't. I like to sing in my spare time, and not just sing, I like to write songs. So I work with a guitarist that I've been working with for like 7 or 8 years now, and we write songs and occasionally play in public when people allow us. And that's one thing that makes me really happy that I do that y'all may not know quite how much of I actually do. I probably spend, I don't know, I do it about once a week. We get together and play music. So other than that, I also used to pretty actively longboard. So a longboard is like a skateboard, but longer, and it kind of flexes in the middle so you can kind of cruise and be a little more mobile on it, and you can like bomb hills. I cannot bomb hills. I'm too afraid to do any really big ones. But when it comes to just cruising the neighborhood, I can still do that, but I was a lot more active at it in my early 20s. So couple random things that you may not have known about me. So it'll be your turn to share during the COVID connection. But before we get to that, I wanted to really quickly share this cool story that I found about Jim Thorpe. So a lot of you are probably still saying, Miss Lawson, I don't really get like why this guy was such a good athlete and why people think he's such a big deal. Think about how good athletes are now. He really was, he was an older athlete. Yeah, he was the first to play football, whatever. He wasn't that cool. He was cool. Listen to this. It wasn't just that he was an amazing athlete. It was his perseverance and his dedication. So Jim Thorpe won 2 gold medals with shoes someone had thrown in the trash. To give you some more context, here's what happened. Jim Thorpe was trying to qualify for the Olympics. You have to go and you have to qualify. You have to beat certain times. And then they say, okay, you're good enough to go to the Olympics. So he was at one of these qualifying events. It was a multiple day event. He was trying to qualify for a bunch of different events. And his shoes get stolen on like the first or second day. For some reason, one guy has like one extra shoe he can loan him. So he does. And that one fits him pretty well. He finds another in the trash that does not fit him, but he wears a thicker sock with that one and makes it work. And so now Jim Thorpe is forced to compete in these shoes that are very ill-fitting. You can see that the shoes were very different back then. And he does. And not only does he compete, but he qualifies for the Olympics in multiple events and is just killing it in these terrible shoes. Like, this guy was not a diva who just had to have things a certain way. He was a legend, and he, made it work and excelled at it, where others had top-notch equipment and stuff and still couldn't compete with this dude. So I just thought that was one more just example of how awesome Jim Thorpe is and why he's such a legend. With that being said and shared, let's hop into our read aloud for today. A bit, guys. So when we left off, I asked you to yesterday. I asked you to do some of your own reading to then determine if certain parts of the text were narrative or informational, and then to also kind of ask yourself how those narratives or information connect to narratives and information you've already read or learned in the text. And so you should have read a bit about Pratt and how he would sort of, manipulate some students into actually doing things like speaking their own language was wrong. And then how other times, kids would kind of just repeat back what they knew he wanted to hear, but were still sharing their own Native American cultures and stuff at night in secret. So you should have read about that. And then you should have also read a little bit about how the Carlisle Indians, had not really beat their goal, but they had become, a reputable team, even though they weren't the best. And people were starting to take note of that. So that's where we're going to leave off. And then you're going to have some places where I'm going to ask you to go ahead and stop as I'm reading, where I might ask you about narrative versus information from yesterday. We might continue to practice that skill. And then also we're going to think a little bit about author's purpose and making inferences, thinking about reading between the lines. What can we infer from certain parts of the text? And then why would an author include certain things in the text? So we'll go ahead and get started right here. Too much praise cannot be given this Indian team for its showing this year, wrote Caspar Whitney, an influential sports writer in Harper's Weekly, for the quality of its football after but 3 years of the game at Carlisle, and above all, for its sportsmanly conduct and clean play. They were picked on and provoked, got some lousy calls from the ref, but they kept their cool and played through it all. I regard the conduct of these Indians, Whitney wrote, to have had a more wholesome influence on the game than any occurrence of recent years. So part of me thinks this is more informational because it's like straight up quotes from a newspaper at that time. And I think what the author's trying to connect this to that I learned earlier in the book is I remember Pratt telling the Native Americans, like, hey, if y'all are going to have a football team, you can't play dirty. You have to play by the rules and you have to basically overcome all the stereotypes that other people think of you, right? And so, unfortunately, they were forced to do that. But the thing is, they did it. They didn't play, without dignity. They were sports. They were good sports, right? They conducted themselves and with respect, and then treated others with respect on the field. So this is showing me that they were able to do what Pratt asked without a problem. And this was a sport in dire need of a wholesome influence. On October 30th, 1897, at a game between the University of Virginia and Georgia, a Georgia player named Von Gammon dove into a mass of Virginia blockers. He hit the ground head first and wound up at the bottom of a pile of bodies. Everyone else got up. Gammon lay on the grass. The blood drained from his face. His eyes were open, his lips quivering. Doctor ran onto the field and diagnosed a fractured skull. Gammon was lifted into a horse-drawn ambulance and rushed to a hospital. He died early the next morning. "Football must go," declared a headline in Gammon's hometown paper, the Rome Tribune. "Stop the deadly game." It looked as if this might actually happen. The University of Georgia canceled the remainder of its football season, and the Georgia legislature passed a bill banning the sport entirely. Governor William Atkinson was debating whether to sign the bill into law when he got a letter from Rosalind Gammon Vaughn's mother. "Grant me the right," she asked, "to request that my boy's death not be used to defeat the most cherished object of his life." Atkinson vetoed the bill, but with each grisly injury, the national debate over football's future intensified. "Death on the football field," screamed the headline of the New York Herald just 2 weeks after Gammon's death. The story reported that 9 boys and young men had been killed in the past year alone playing football. Descriptions of each fatal injury, mostly fractured skulls and broken necks, were given. The next day, the New York World ran a ghoulish cartoon of a skeleton playing football. The New York Journal printed a front-page editorial calling for the banning of the game. "Utter nonsense," charged a young politician from New York named Theodore Roosevelt, who would later become president. A Harvard graduate and a football fan, Roosevelt made no apologies for his love of the sport. In what would become an increasingly heated debate in the years ahead, he would be one of football's most outspoken defenders. "I emphatically disbelieve in seeing Harvard or any other college turn out mollycoddles instead of vigorous men," Roosevelt told students at a visit to his old school. Mollycoddles is like wimp. "I do not in the least object to a sport because it is rough." We are going to pause right there to make some inferences about Roosevelt, and then you can go ahead and answer that question, click next, and the read aloud will continue on the next video.